Still with me, and we have, in addition to the team, defense attorney Ambrosio Rodriguez. Ambrosio, good to see you. Let me start with you. In the context of this Russia investigation, we got these comments from President Trump a couple of hours ago, speaking on a radio show and expressing some frustration with the separation of powers. Take a listen.
The saddest thing is that because I'm the President of the United States, I am not supposed to be involved with the Justice Department. I'm not supposed to be involved with the FBI. I'm not supposed to be doing the kind of things that I would love to be doing. And I'm very frustrated by it.
Ambrosio, you're our legal mind here. You hear that from the U.S. president, especially in the context of a special counsel investigation underway, which, you know, he doesn't directly reference. I'm just saying, with that as the mood music, you hear that and you think what?
That he got it completely wrong. I mean, it is a complete misstatement. I mean, the President of the United States has obviously the power and authority to appoint Attorney General, Deputy Attorney Generals, and set the policy for the Department of Justice. What he doesn't have in order to protect the integrity of our justice system is the ability or the power to get involved in the actual litigation or the investigations and to try to determine who to prosecute and when. I mean, that is the job of career attorneys and prosecutors that make a determination as to whether or not there is probable cause for investigation and who to investigate. We don't want a system where a president of the United States, for political reasons, investigates or prosecutes people. That's why we have civil servants and career prosecutors make those decisions. So he's just wrong. That's just a misstatement of the law and his job.
Well, Caroline, it sounds more like a wishing, if you will, and that things were different. You know, you hear the president say, you know, I'm not able to do the things that, you know, I really want to be doing. I mean, what is he getting at here? How are you interpreting those statements?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that he's bringing it up at a time when his campaign manager has been indicted, and Gates, deputy campaign manager, and Mueller has already turned Papadopoulos. It's obvious that he is working with him, and so it's a matter of time before more people are indicted. So I think the president is lamenting the fact that he isn't a dictator over the Department of Justice, over the FBI. He's specifically lamenting the fact that he can't actually meddle in investigations. And I think we've seen this a lot with him, right? That he has these dictatorial tendencies. He thought the president was king, perhaps, you know, would have been great 240 years ago, though. We actually established a democratic republic with an elected president who is contained by the Constitution, and I'm glad to see that Donald Trump is discovering that, and he's being very obvious about the fact that he doesn't like it.
Well, John, the president may not be able to do what he would like with the FBI and the Justice Department, but he can needle James Comey. Take a look at this tweet that he put out earlier on Thursday, citing Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson opening statement about our once cherished and great FBI was so sad to watch. James Comey's leadership was a disaster. He puts out the tweet. We hear these comments about wanting to be more involved. What is the president exactly up to?
Yeah, I think that's a bipartisan assessment of James Comey. Ask Hillary Clinton what she thinks about.
Bipartisan for the same motivations.
James Comey is one of the many different groups of people that Hillary Clinton blames for her loss, and in her book that's out, and someone she's called out by name on many occasions on her book tour. I think the primary issue, well, there's two issues. One, the separation of powers for someone who comes from outside the political world is a bit of a pill and a bit of a problem. You have to learn your way through it because there are three branches of government. The other thing I think that is top of mind is he's still angry at Jeff Sessions for recusing himself. Because if Jeff Sessions didn't recuse himself, there'd be no Robert Mueller, there'd be no investigation. He sees this Russia investigation as just one big distraction that's taking him away.
How can he still say that after the George Papadopoulos plea agreement? How can, I mean, surely this week, this investigation became mighty real for this White House.
There's still no proof of collusion. I mean, there's still the whole Paul Manafort charge has nothing to do with Russian collusion. That has to do with him not filling out the proper forms with the Treasury Department and trying to hide money from the IRS.
It has to do with the fact that multiple people in the Trump campaign have lied or covered up.
It has nothing to do with Russian collusion, which is the reason that Bob Mueller exists. The other thing I think that's causing him headaches with the Department of Justice justice right now is Rod Rosenstein is still a bit of a mystery, not just to Trump, but to a lot of the political people in the West Wing of the White House. And so they feel that the guy that they picked to run the Justice Department isn't the guy that's calling the shots. And I think that he's going to have a lot of hard feelings for Jeff Sessions for a long time.
Okay, Ambrosio, to you quickly. This is the day, Thursday, that we learned that Jared Kushner handed over documents to the special counsel and that questions are being asked about Jared's involvement in the firing of James Comey. Does that suggest to you that Mueller is building an obstruction of justice case here?
Oh, absolutely. In these, look, when the FBI and the federal government goes after an organization and does an investigation, they flip people. They begin where they can and they move up the ladder. That is, they start with someone like Papadopoulos and see what information he provides in order to move up the chain. I mean, look, we just have to look at Watergate. It began with a break-in with people that the White House claimed that they had no knowledge of and no involvement with, and it went up the chain to the Attorney General at the time, and then eventually into the Oval Office. So we are still at the very beginning of all this, but obviously everything that's happened with that we've seen in the news for the last year involving Russia, and especially I think the most important thing is the number of times that Jared Kushner has gone back and refiled his disclosures. That, to me, is a big indication of where this investigation is going and what Robert Mueller is talking about. And just briefly about John's point that the separation of powers is a bitter pill to swallow. Look, I was taught in the 4th grade in civics that the separation of power is one of the greatest things about this country and what makes it so special, not a bitter pill to swallow.
All right.
Well, I mean, FDR tried to pack the court.
Because we're going to have a break to get to, but
how many presidents wanted line-item vetoes? This is not something that's new. I totally agree with you. The separation of powers that we have is the best form of government on planet Earth, but it's a frustration not just of this president, of many presidents.
All right, we have to hit pause. Please stay with me. We're going to come back after a very quick break. Next on Newsroom LA, President Donald Trump is calling for the death penalty against the New York terror suspect. Plus, ISIS says that suspect was one of its soldiers. The terror group's claims next. We're going to discuss all of this when we come back. Hello, everyone. ISIS claims the New York terror attacker is a soldier of the caliphate. The claim was just posted online by the group's weekly newspaper, Al Napa. ISIS did not provide any credible evidence that it had knowledge of the attack before it happened or that it was involved in the planning process. The terror group also did not claim direct responsibility for the attack or specifically name the suspected attacker. Well, the name of the attacker is Saifullah Saipov, and he still has not even entered a plea to federal terrorism charges. But already, President Trump is calling for the death penalty. In a tweet, he said, New York City terrorist was happy as he asked to hang ISIS flag in his hospital room. He killed 8 people, badly injured 12, should get death penalty. Well, my guests Caroline, John, and Ambrosio are still with me, and they're here to discuss the president's death penalty comments. Ambrosio, let me read you some tweets that the president put out just a couple of days ago, yesterday, I believe, with regards to the suspect in this terror attack. The president said this: would love to send the NYC terrorists to Guantanamo, but statistically that process takes much longer than going through the federal system. He goes on to say there is also something appropriate about keeping him in the home of the horrible crime he committed. Should move fast, death penalty. Ambrosio, you're a legal man. I mean, what does it mean for the case here against Saipov that you have the President of the United States openly calling for the death penalty? Some would say that he's prejudicing the case before it's even got off the ground.
Right. He made a tough job 100 times tougher. The defense team will file 2 types of motion. One is to change venue. That means move the trial out of New York City, because the President of the United States, and not just the President of the United States, but a resident of New York City, and maybe its most famous at the time, said that he should get the death penalty. Now, how they will argue to the judge that it's impossible for him to receive a fair trial in Manhattan because of the president's tweet. Moreover, they will also argue that he should not be eligible for the death penalty because now the President of the United States has come out and said, before he knows anything about the case, other than what we know from the news, because there are other defenses other than just the factual defenses. I'm sure there's going to be a mental health defense, maybe an insanity defense. But the fact that the president has done this, has tweeted this, it gives the defense ammunition that they didn't have before. Now, they might not succeed, but it makes the job of career prosecutors. And look, as someone who has, as a prosecutor, tried death penalty cases, as a defense attorney, defended death penalty cases, there's nothing like a death penalty case. It is the most difficult thing an attorney does. It requires the best of the best. The judges are highly qualified. So to kind of put this in the courts, to bring this tweet that kind of makes a sideshow of whether or not this gentleman should be tried in New York City and whether he should get the death penalty, it just causes more chaos and distraction in one of the most disciplined and most disciplined parts of being a lawyer, which is death penalty litigation. It's just a shame that he just couldn't keep it to himself.
And John, let me come to you on that point. The president couldn't keep it to himself, as you heard Ambrosio put it, weighing in, calling for the death penalty. He did the same thing in terms of weighing in on the Bo Bergdahl case, the U.S. Army soldier who deserted in Afghanistan. And the judge actually said, basically, that he will give him a lighter sentence, if you will, because of the president's comments. I mean, we have a real-world example of the impact of speaking out ahead of a trial, and he's done it again.
This is why we have the death penalty for people like this. And I wouldn't be too worried about making the jury biased, considering the fact that the guy committed this crime on television at high noon. So I think we all know where the jury's going to go with this anyway. I'd execute this guy twice if we could. And this is one thing where Trump is...
He's still entitled to...
And he'll get one.
The norms and the due process, and is entitled to a fair trial. That is what this country is built upon, right?
And he'll have a trial. But the fact of the matter is that we're so used to having presidents that when something like this happens, the first thing we do is we get lectured to about, now, don't anyone get mad, don't anyone do anything rash or do anything wrong here, instead of anger at the person who perpetrated the crime. I'm happy we finally have a leader that's coming out and throwing a little heat this guy's way.
It is interesting that in the case of the white supremacist in Charlottesville who ran his car into Heather Heyer and claimed her life, which was also captured on camera, the president did not come out and say a death penalty.
And this guy's going to get prosecuted, and they're moving forward with that. People were criticizing him about Las Vegas, too.
He has a double standard, right? When it comes to a person of color driving into a crowd, which I agree with you. I'm glad he condemned it. I think it was stupid to use death penalty because it does weaken the case. But he didn't do the same thing with Heyer in Charlottesville, right? He said there are good people on both sides. Where was his condemnation of the Las Vegas shooter? Why didn't he call for the death penalty there?
Because the guy was dead.
He's got a double... Oh, sorry. You're right. You're absolutely... But why didn't he call out that shooter?
The difference between Las Vegas and this one is with this one, we know the motive of the shooter. With Las Vegas, we still don't know the motive of the shooter.
Let's make a clear correlation between Charlottesville and what happened in New York in that case. Because if that's okay, hate is hate. I mean, it's been unproven, admittedly, but on the face of it, hate is hate. But the president's response was different.
And he condemned that. He absolutely did.
He didn't condemn that.
And there was one person.
He did not condemn what happened in Las Vegas.
There was one person that was killed there. This was a terror attack that killed multiple people.
It was a terror attack in Las Vegas. He didn't condemn it. He didn't do anything.
We are going to
do that.
We must hit pause. Ambrosio, I want to say thank you for joining us and giving us your legal insights. We very much appreciate it. Thank you. Just one quick point to